Welcome, everyone. My name is Clem. You don't know me, but I will be co-hosting this session with our dear Sudo. Just to give you a little intro about me, I met Harry Halpin, our CEO, in Lebanon at the American University of Beirut. He was giving a blockchain class, and I was his student. And then I started at NIM as an intern, doing some market and pricing research for the DVPN and assisting to some very cool events in Paris, where I met some of the community and industry people, and I really loved to be there, to see the people, meet them in live, and create like closer relationships. And that's why now I'm super happy to be here. And Sudo proposed me to be there, like to co-host this session and present to you our Ade and Alexia, which will tell you a lot of very interesting things. So Alexia is our DevRel, and she's working closely with Ade on partnerships and integrations. And you'll have some insider insights today on how they collaborate and on different kinds of partnerships. And so this is our second week and third masterclass of the first level of NIM Shipyard, which is 6 weeks. And so this level 1 is only about the big picture, but it's still we are still going very deep in subjects. So the first masterclass was given by Harry about how the internet is broken and how NIM is fixing this. Then this week we had Claudia, our chief scientist, telling us everything about metadata. And today, well, you'll see what these guys are going to tell you. I really recommend that you guys watch the previous presentations. I loved Claudia's one. It's even if you already know some stuff about metadata, she always have some very good special insights to add, and their presentations are always better with time. So at the end of the session, you will be able to ask your questions. You can ask them on YouTube or Twitch chat, or also on the Element channel, the general channel. So Sudo, I give you the floor.
Well, first of all, big thanks for that amazing. First of all, big thanks for that amazing intro, and hopefully everybody who is as bored with Hux as I am. No, I'm just kidding. We love Hux, but we thought we could spice things up a little bit by bringing on a brand new co-host. So thanks for that, Clemence, and welcome to the first masterclass that you're hosting with me. So a bit of practical stuff before we move on to our presenters. As you know, this is the last masterclass of level 1. So after this, the only mandatory thing to attend if you want to follow along Shipyard is the exam, which is going to be quite the big thing. It is going to be taking place live, so make sure to make it on time. It is going to be on our Discord server. And in multiple languages. So good luck, everyone, with that. The prize pool for this level is 350,000 NIM tokens. So that's a pretty nice little chunk. So make sure to make it on time, and also make sure to do your homework and participate in the exam. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no more things to do during level 1 in terms of attending fun events. There's going to be actually a pretty good one tomorrow, which is by and large a UPA roundtable. We're going to be having a conversation with Jaya, Hawks, and myself, with Kenny Lee from Menta and Alan Scott from Railgun. and Evan McMullen from Disco. And the conversation will be about privacy primitives in Web3. It will be a fireside chat. I am super stoked for this, so make sure to join. It is going to be same time, same channel, so it will also be a YouTube live stream. It has been announced on all of our channels, so make sure to keep an eye and also hit the notify me button so you don't forget. Of course, the recording will stay up on the channel, so if you end up missing it, then no worries because you can watch it later. Now, after that, for those of you who are thinking about forming a squad, which is a great idea and a really exciting idea, make sure to stick around because Hux and Mikola are going to be giving a workshop for you on Jitsi starting at 5 p.m. CET. The details will be shared on all of the usual channels. So the Shipyard announcements channel, make sure to join it because you're going to be seeing the first example of a squad, what it looks like, and also find out about why it's important to form squads. So if you didn't make notes, don't worry because all of this info, as usual, is available on shipyard.nimtech.net. Hopefully, a link will be dropped by one of our beautiful CMs in the chat of this call. But now that we have the practical stuff out of the way, let's actually move on to our presenters. So we, as usual, it's becoming a bit of a tradition here on these masterclasses. We have a warm-up question for Ade and Alexia. So Clemence, what do you have for them?
So, Alexia, Ade, I want to ask you, how did you end up in the Web3 world and why did you join a privacy project?
Hey guys.
Let's start with Alexia.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Suda. It's a pleasure to be here. So how did I join the privacy ecosystem and the Web3 ecosystem? So this started in 2016. It's a bit of a cliche story. But at the time, I was a student at a business school and I was looking into investing the little bit of money that I had. And I had a trader friend who told me to look into an emerging tech called blockchain. Through my research, I stumbled upon the Bitcoin white paper. I loved the rationale and the philosophy, and I decided to join the industry. This officially happened in 2017 when I started working for a set like SSI protocol, self-sovereign identity protocol. So everything that has to do with the idea of a decentralized identity. And while I was working there, I became increasingly more interested in the notions of trust, power, and privacy. And I started working on a privacy-oriented project with a friend who's a cryptographer, which was called Enigma. Which we managed later on to get incubated at Mozilla, but we had issues monetizing it, which is something that we're solving at NIM. And so because of these issues, I rejoined a full-time job at Tezos, which some of you may know, which is an L1. I stayed there a few years. Later on, joined a DeFi protocol as a head of growth. But throughout time and throughout the years, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the tech side of things and to the privacy side of things as well, which were topics that I was fascinated with. And I had been following them for a while, and here I am now as a DevRel. So, it's like the dream come true. It's been a wild ride so far, but I'm super happy because I love the team and I love the cause. So that's me. Ade, I think it's your turn.
Great.
Yeah, Ade, next up.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for having me, Sudo and Clemence, and also great intro, Alexia. I've got a lot to live up to. But my story started in 2017 as well, funny enough. By that time, I had spent a number of years in management consulting for my sins. And I had been looking into Web3 as well. And I was pretty sure that it was going to change the World Wide Web as we knew it. And then I joined a VC firm to invest in Web3 companies. I figured this was the best way for me to get my foot in and to have access to a breadth of projects doing a lot of interesting things. Fast forward to today as head of business developments for NIM. I believe that privacy is very important because it's actually a right. I see it as a right for everyone rather than a privilege. It's important for everyone to be able to have control of their data and to say where they share it and when they share it. So that's my story.
Thanks for sharing. And I guess without further ado, we should probably just hand over the stage to you guys and allow you to take it away.
Okay, so slides. I can't see the slides. I don't know if they're up. Should they be up? Oh, okay, nice. Now they're up.
Now they are.
Okay, nice. So in today's presentation, we're basically going to talk about three things: Web3, privacy, and NIM, or NIM, privacy, and Web3, in however order you want to take that. And during the time that we have together, what we'd like to do is try to make people, well, try to make you understand why privacy is increasingly becoming a necessity, not only in the digital and Web3 realm, but as well as, how it translates into the physical one. And to do this, so next slide, please, Tudo. So to do this, I'd like to start off with a quote from one of the books that I find to have invaluable impact on the matter. So I'd leave a few seconds to everyone to read it because it's quite a mindful. Tudo, actually, let me know when you're done reading it. That'd be great. Oh, no, Suda, not the next slide. No, go on to the previous slide. Okay, thank you. So basically, I'll read the quote for those of you who are on the phone or whatever. So it reads as, personal information is increasingly used to enforce standards of behavior. Information processing is developing, therefore, into an essential element of long-term strategies of manipulation intended to mold and adjust individual conduct. And so the question that I wanted to ask the audience, or Clémence, or you, Sudo, was to know whether you knew where this quote came from. But now we do know, because it's on the next slide, so we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Sudo. So this quote comes from a book that is written by Shoshana Zuboff, which is called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Shoshana is a Harvard professor at the Harvard Business School. She's also a faculty associate at the Harvard Law School and a center called the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society, which is basically a research center within Harvard University that focuses on the study of the crypto space. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was founded in '96. So basically, to some extent, we could argue that this lady knows what she's talking about. Next slide, please. Yeah. Oh, no. Yes, thank you. And so the premises of the book is basically that what the author argues is that surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as a free raw material for translation into what she calls behavioral data, which are declared as proprietary behavioral surplus, fed into advanced manufacturing processes known as machine intelligence, and used to feed what she calls behavioral futures market. And so basically, this story of surveillance capitalism is a modern one, but the book takes us through the 70s and the 80s to understand where all that came from, how it developed, etc. And the key message here is basically that prior changes to capitalism helped loosen regulations and change attitudes for the online age. So hopefully all hope is not lost, but we need to take action. And how do we do that? Well, you wouldn't be here if you did not have any idea on how to do that already. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, today we're going to talk about three things, and Web3 being one of them. So the first thing that we're going to focus is the quick history of Web3. Next slide, please. So for those of you who have been in the Web3 space for a while, you've probably have seen this slide or variations of this slide pretty much 100 times, but it's still interesting to go through it, so I'll quickly do so. So at the very beginning, there was Web 1, which was, stemmed from, 1980, to 2000. And it's what we call the static web. It basically began as a collection of static web pages with basic text and limited graphics, which was primarily used for sharing information and research amongst academics and governments. We all know how the web started. And it was quite limited in terms of the feature or the creative capabilities for users. slowly in the year 2000 to the year 2010, we evolved and got to what we call Web 2, which is the social web, also called the social web, and basically characterized by user-generated content. But of course, through the year with user-generated content, we saw the emergence of what we call data commoditization, which is the topic that the author Shoshana talks extensively in her book. And I was still a student at the time, but I remember how trendy a few years, almost a decade ago, big data and analytics were. I was in a business school program, and I remember like all my friends wanted to become data analysts. And I'm not arguing that data is a bad thing, not so, because I truly believe that we need data points to understand the world and to be able to improve ourselves. But the relationship that we have with whomever uses that data and our data should be consensual, right? Otherwise, it leads to cases such as Cambridge Analytica, which we've seen, and that data can very easily become a political instrument for manipulation, which is the whole argument that Shoshana makes in her book, which is very valid today, and especially in the Web3 world. And so all that led to the Web3 world, which started in the 2010-ish years to today. And the idea of the Web3 world is that it's a semantic and decentralized world that's characterized by a more context-aware web. So basically giving machines the ability to process and understand information, data ownership, control, and privacy by design. Privacy by design. Next slide, please. Cool. So when we ask ourselves the questions, why Web3? Why do we need it? We can't really answer them without looking at Bitcoin. I don't know if you can see it. This one. Can you see it, someone? It's no. Okay. Well, anyhow, it's just no, it doesn't work anymore. Sorry, it was my little Bitcoin neon that I had taken for this very special occasion. And so if we look at the birth of Bitcoin, we really start understanding how needs in the physical or in the real world translate into the digital realm and vice versa. Because again, Bitcoin and through its white paper, so peer-to-peer electronic cash system, was meant as an alternative to the traditional financial system. Again, looking at its birth, it was birthed in the aftermath of the global 2008 financial crisis, with the idea of creating a trustless system. And this idea of trustlessness is really key when we talk about Web3. And if we want to translate this idea in technical terms, we could argue that trustlessness is achieved through the consensus protocol. In the same way, we have adjacent ideas, namely disintermediation and self-sovereignty. In technical terms, we could argue that disintermediation translates into the network of nodes that we see in the different, blockchain ecosystems. And self-sovereignty, pseudonymity. I know it's a bit of a long shot, but I mean the explanations are in the slides. Basically, self-sovereignty coming with the acknowledgement of whatever's written under self-sovereignty here in this slide is more the take that Nakamoto had in his Bitcoin white paper, the peer-to-peer electronic cash system white paper. But basically, these 3 points of self-sovereignty, disintermediation, and trustlessness are I would argue, the foundational ideals. I'm not saying that Web3 as it is today is entirely and currently fully designed with these principles in mind, especially when we see everything that's happening with POA's network, for example, Success, what happened with SushiSwap, the different rugs, etc. But it's slowly trying to get there. Next slide, please. So this links back to the previous slide, but we sort of wanted to clarify the key characteristics of Web3, which are namely decentralization. So Web3 being built on the principles of decentralization, meaning that it seeks to reduce the reliance on centralized intermediaries, user control, which we can especially see illustrated through SSI protocols, for example, so self-sovereign identity protocols, and then self-sovereignty, same thing as user control. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of another long shot that I took, but I think it's quite interesting to parallelize the evolution of Web3 with societal development and the increased need for privacy that we have. So if we take the like societal standpoint, we could argue that from barter and nomadic hunter-gatherers style economies, in which we're basically hunter-gatherers, we began cultivating crops and domesticating animals, and that led to the rise of agriculture-based communities. So basically, from nomadic, we moved slowly into more sedentary lifestyle because we had more food, so we could afford to. That led to population growth, later on to the agricultural revolution. Settlements grew into cities, and these cities formed the basics of the different early civilizations that we saw, so Mesopotamia, Egypt, etc. Slowly after that, we saw the specialization of labor at its very early stages, and that basically led, well, a few centuries and wars later to the Industrial Revolution. Later on, after the Industrial Revolution happened, we started seeing a shift to a consumerist-based society, given the new production abilities that we had. And what's interesting is that this consumerism exists both at physical and digital levels. And we could argue that to some extent it is what has led us to the issues that we have with current data commoditization and the increased need for privacy that we see today. And so this parallel can be drawn to some extent to the Web3 world, which is what's below barter economies, agricultural and industrial revolution points, and can be basically translated as Bitcoin by being a P2P electronic cash system. Was like our early barter economies, in which basically we traded things in a disintermediated P2P fashion. Ethereum came around, and with the emergence of smart contracts, it allowed us to develop more complex verticals, such as the ones that we see today, so DeFi, NFT, DAOs, SSI infrastructure, etc. So we can draw the parallel, with the Industrial Revolution that happened in the real world, and now in the Web3 world, we're at the point in which all this data is aggregated into these immutable ledgers, because that's how blockchains work, and we have all these, and so that is what happens on the Web3 world. And in the real world, we have all these GAFAs monetizing our data. So the main key takeaway here is just that as societies have evolved from basic trade to more complex data-driven economies, we basically see a similar trajectory being followed by Web3. Next slide, please. So with all this, we justify a clear need for privacy. Next slide, please. So although decentralized, enormous amounts of data in Web3 remain unprotected. So the main point here is something that I see a lot of people being confused about when we talk about Web3, which is that decentralization doesn't mean privacy. I think it's quite obvious to most of you, but it may not be to everyone. And why should we care about privacy, will you ask? If you didn't trust or didn't like what I've presented before, then I will hope and I will try with the next slides to take us and walk us, change the approach, go from a theoretical approach with everything that we were discussed, previously with the evolutionary approach, etc., to a more concrete understanding of why privacy is important and why privacy matters in Web3. Next slide, please. Thanks. So let's start with the DeFi vertical. So here, the list is much more extensive. I've just focused on the examples that seem the most obvious for us. I'm not arguing that a technology such as NIM can target all of these. I'm just arguing that, due to a lack of privacy, whether it's at user or a solution architecture level, this leads to these attack vectors. So the first one being transaction linkability. As we all know, as all the transactions are recorded onto a public ledger, analyzing transactional patterns becomes trivial. So basically, an attacker can link a user's wallet address to potentially a real-world identity or any other wallet addresses. So this is the first problem. Second, front running, which most of us are aware of. And front running happens when an attacker observes a pending transaction onto the blockchain's mempool and try to execute that specific transaction, but just with a higher gas, ensuring that his transaction will go before, and thereby front running the actual user. Then we have MEVs. So minimum or minor extractable value. And the idea here is basically that miners and validators are looking for arbitrage opportunities between different sexes, reorder and prioritize the transaction that allow them to make a profit. And there's been different ongoing discussions in different ecosystems about how to address these MEVs. And again, these are not really user level kind of problems that can be solved, but more like architectural level, but still like privacy linked. So pretty important here. And finally, another type of problem, or attack vector is what we call the Eclipse attack. And basically the idea of an Eclipse attack is that we're going to have an attacker that's going to target the connectivity between a victim's node and the rest of the blockchain's network by surrounding his node with malicious nodes, leading to the compromised identity of the victim's node and potential financial losses. Next slide, please, Udo. Thank you. So now if we look at, similar, potential attack vectors in the NFT vertical, we have three main points which are kind of interrelated, to the idea of transaction linkability, but could be branded differently and have a few points of differentiation. The first one being pseudonym de-anonymization. So again, like all other NFT transactions are transparent since they are recorded in the public ledger, and thus that makes the anonymization trivial. Tracking and profiling. This is a bit different, but basically because NFT, the fact of belonging to an NFT community can reveal much more about yourself than a simple financial transaction, and thereby this can be used for profiling purposes at a different level. And it is actually currently being used by Web3 growth tools. But I'll talk about that later. And finally, transaction linkability, which is the same notion that we were discussing when we were having a look at the DeFi attack vectors. So we can go to the next slide, please, Udo. Thank you. And so now infrastructure. So with this slide, we're taking a bit of a step back and we'll stay at a high level because like the details don't really matter and are pretty complex, but basically for L2 private chains. So even if a chain brands itself as private, the ZK proofs of whatever they're doing are constructed after the user submits a transaction or interacts with what we call the sequencer, and thus like the metadata and the IP are already leaked. So it doesn't really matter, like what they do after doesn't really matter basically. Web3 wallets. So even by using a privacy-oriented wallet, so it's the three touch. How can I explain this? The three touch different infrastructural elements, but are kind of a similar problem, if that makes sense. But so we Web3 wallets. Even by using a privacy-oriented wallet, network traffic and metadata are still exposed and can reveal a pattern about users. And then we finally have RPC service providers, and that links back to the previous two problems. And what's interesting here is that we could potentially argue that RPC service providers could be seen as a single point of failure or single point of failure, and that poses a privacy risk, as they could potentially expose a user's IP address and reveal his or her online activity and location to third parties. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do these manifest in real life? Why would we have to care about our online Web3 privacy? And I'd like to illustrate that with a few use cases, in real life use cases. Next slide, please. So we first have that case, which I called the Venezuela miners hunt, which happened in 2018. It was pretty mediatized, and the main key takeaways here are that in Venezuela, well, there's the source, so you can read the article later on if you want to. But in Venezuela, individuals were turning to cryptocurrencies and to mining as a means of survival. And as an economic opportunity due to the country's economic crisis. And what the article highlights are all the risks and challenges that were faced by these miners, including threats of violence, detention, and extortion by the local government, and which is why I've put that quote that reads as, so it's the author of the article just writing about a Mr. X, who was his main point of contact when drafting the article. And the quote goes as I read and reread his email describing Bitcoin miners being hunted, raided, extorted, and arrested by local police, and confirmations of the rumors of state-level Bitcoin mining going on, I realized the magnitude of risk Mr. X was taking. The back and forth between Mr. X and I went on for almost 3 months. I feared every day for his safety, and still do, as well as the many Venezuelan people putting their lives at risk mining Bitcoin. And what's even more interesting is that through the article, Mr. X kept emphasizing on the importance of concealing any sort of PII, so like private information, and maintaining a low profile to avoid detection by these authorities. So privacy matters are in real life. Next slide, please. If you don't think that was, telling enough, there's a second case, which I called Chinas's case, which was also pretty mediatized, and some of you may know of, which basically involved a lady called Elizabeth Bisbee, who was the head of investigations, attesting at the US Congress, I think, against another person called Roman Sterlingov, who was the alleged creator of a mixer called Bitcoin Fog. And through her testimony, she kept mentioning that she was unaware of scientific evidence for the accuracy of gene analysis software they use, which is called a reactor. And they couldn't provide any statistical or scientific evidence supporting the software's accuracy. And basically, the whole discussion highlighted the fact that at this point, blockchain analysis is more an art than a science. Which is something that becomes a big issue when these tools are used by law enforcement and governments to convict people for crimes we eventually aren't even sure they've committed, since we don't have valid proofs for it. And there's been other few cases claiming to be able to track some people across mixers, which is pretty difficult. And they all had to do with metadata. So metadata matters. Next slide, please. So the last case that I want to focus on is the MetaMask IP scandal, which most of us are aware of, which involved a recollection of more than 31 million users' IP address when they were interacting with an RPC provider called Infura. And I've added a quote that I took directly from the Consensus blog, which reads as, when users interact with Ethereum or other blockchains, such as sending a transaction or requesting a balance through an RPC provider such as Infura, the provider receives both the user's IP and the wallet address to provide the service. This is not Infura specific and is consistent with how web architecture works generally. And here you see the issue is like, IP and wallet addresses are linked, and this is not just specific to one solution. It's specific to how the entire architecture works, and this is what we're trying to solve at NIM level. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I think that by now we understood the importance, the needs, and the current opportunities that privacy offer. So again, privacy is the basis of self-sovereignty, and privacy is the precondition for people to have control over their online identities and eventually over their lives, as we've seen with the previous cases. Privacy primitives are maturing. So what are privacy primitives? They're basically the fundamental building blocks that are used to build and enhance privacy-oriented solutions. And so these are developing, stabilizing, and gaining popularity. And we can see this through the weekly requests that we've seen go through a group called the Universal Privacy Alliance for projects wanting to join in. Next slides, please. Thanks. So privacy is even more critical in Web3 due to the existence of the immutable ledgers, and we've explained that thoroughly before. So whether we talk about layer 1, layer 2, or layer 0, which is how we position ourselves as NIM, and you'll understand later why, privacy is key. Next slide, please. So our solution, how do we address that? Next slide, please. So NIM, what are we? So we are basically a decentralized, incentivized, network level privacy infrastructure. And I know this is a mouthful, and I will be explaining what that means. But okay, yeah, let me explain. Decentralized. So we are decentralized through the architecture that I'll be explaining a bit. Sorry, I realized that when I proposed to explain it word by word, it actually made it much more complex and lengthy. Okay, no, let me explain how we are designed first as a privacy infrastructure, and then I'll get into the detail of network level and incentivization. Sorry, so we are a privacy infrastructure in the sense that we leverage different technical components to create this infrastructure. The first one is what we call the NIM mixnet. So mixnet is a technology that was invented by David Shom. It's not only NIM leverages, basically, that's what I'm trying to say, sorry. And the mixnet is basically a tool that can help preventing traffic analysis by what we would call a global adversary. So exactly what was happening through the cases, the real life cases that I've explained before, I've introduced before. This mixnet is incentivized. How is it incentivized? Through what we call the NIM token, which is a utility token. This NIM token lives on a chain, which is called the Nix blockchain, which is a COSM-WASM and IBC-enabled blockchain. And so this is why we say we are decentralized, incentivized privacy infrastructure. On this infrastructure, we also leverage what we call ZK NIMs, NIM credentials. I'll get into the detail of that later on. And all this is at network, works at network level. And I'll clarify in the next slide, sorry, what we mean by network level. So next slide, Sudo, please. So this slide is basically a simplified version of what's called the official 7 layers OSI model. OSI stands for Open Systems Interconnection, and it's a conceptual framework that is used to understand and standardize how different networking protocols and technologies interact within a computer network. And the idea here is that we work, so NIM, we work at network level, and by working at network level, we can basically be integrated or integrate into anything that's above. So any sort of application, anything that uses a network to route traffic, basically. And what's important to understand here is that although in the OSI or the 5 layers model, we are at level 3, so network layer. we brand ourselves as a layer 0 in the Web3 world, just because we are such a low, well, we are at a low level in the network layer model, but any we could argue that any blockchain ecosystem would here in this model be at an application layer, which makes us a layer 0 for these ecosystems, if that makes sense. That's it, basically. Next slide, please, Sina. And being, a layer 3 in the OSI model or a layer 0 for other blockchain, like other ecosystem, explains why we can claim that, NIM can go beyond Web3, as our mixnet can be basically used to power Web2 solutions. And when we talk about Web2 solutions, we talk about secure messaging apps, secure document sharing and collaboration, for example, platforms, anonymous blogging and publishing, microblogging, whistleblowing platforms, email services, file storage, etc., etc. And in Web3, Web3 wallets, we've discussed that before. Infrastructure, Max, which is the head DevRel manager, has been working on integration with libp2p. And libp2p is basically like a library that is used by builder to build on top of. And so that would give builders the ability to use the mixnet directly from libp2p, if that makes sense. RPC service providers, which we've talked in length just before, privacy L2s, same thing, and IBC enabled chains, since we are an IBC enabled chains ourselves. So broadly speaking, anything that has to do with any sort of network interaction, sending data, sending transactions, payments, anything really. Sorry, next slide, please, Seda. And so here is basically an overview of how, as a builder, integrator, or just someone who's really curious about NIM could build, use, or integrate with NIM. So the different ways are, if we start with building, which is the one little star. So if we look at that, there are 3 tools that we could leverage. The first one being the different standalone clients that we have, which for a builder we would not recommend and would only recommend as a last recourse. And we have 3 standalone clients: the WASM, the WebSocket, and the SOX5. We have the TypeScript SDK, which is basically can be seen arguably as a wraparound around the WASM clients that allows builder to use what we call mix fetch, and I'll get into the detail of mix fetch a little later, execute and query on the NIM smart contracts, send and receive traffic over the NIM mixnet, which is the piece of technology that we were discussing before, and buy and consume ZK NIMs. Rust is very similar. We're just gonna name potentially mix fetch differently, and I'll get into the detail of mix fetch a little later on. And the Rust SDK, it will be most likely called mix request. And so now, if you want to use, as a user, you're not necessarily a builder, you're not necessarily like really good technically, you will have the ability to use the credentials, buy the credentials to use our mixnet in the coming months, and also connect existing platforms through a tool that we've created, which is called NIM Connect, which is basically a GUI app, so just an app that wraps around the SOX5 clients that we have to proxy app traffic through our mixnet. And the last one, which we're currently using for different integrations with the partners that we're collaborating with, is called MixFetch. So MixFetch is arguably part of the TypeScript SDK, and the idea of MixFetch is that it's a drop-in replacement for fetch, and basically allows builder to route calls through the mixnet. Next slide, please. And we're done. With my part, and I'll let my partner Ade step in now.
Thanks, Alexia. And now we'll next slide, please. Next slide, Sudo. Thanks. So the first use case here is data ownership, and Ocean is doing this really well. It allows a user to own their data, to say where they want to distribute it, and if they want to, they can even monetize it rather than this being put into the hands of some private company. Next is decentralized identity, and this is being done really well by Polygon ID. A real world use case of this would be, say, if you wanted to make use of some healthcare services, you could expose just your name and your date of birth to the healthcare provider rather than your whole ID card, and this would give you access to the service. Next is Brave and private browsing. For many years now, they have been pioneering private browsing, allowing you to surf the web without getting tracked or without being bombarded by adverts. And all of these use cases need a layer 0 technology like NIM to provide the level of privacy that we can afford. Next slide, please. Right, so let's look at privacy in DeFi. Next slide, please. So stepping through this from a user perspective this time, privacy in DeFi means reducing the risk of targeted attacks. If a hacker cannot link your trades to your IP address, then it makes it a lot more difficult for them to target you personally with their hacking attacks. In the same vein, privacy allows you to keep a hold of your strategies when doing trades, which means that you can now start to trade on the same level as some of the biggest asset managers out there who have their own proprietary strategies. Avoiding front running, which Alexia already touched on. Financial autonomy is also very important. So users should be able to say where, how, and when they want to make trades. And also, something that we probably don't think about enough is regulatory compliance. With privacy in DeFi, it actually makes it a lot easier for users as well as DeFi platforms to adhere to some privacy regulations that have been set by government bodies. Next slide, please. Okay, encrypted communication. Next slide. So communication in messaging. We'll start with data integrity. Privacy allows you to vouch for where a message originated from, as well as the contents of the message. You can know for sure that the contents have not been tampered with. You can also know for sure who sent the message, and you can choose definitely where that message is going to. And last but not least, you have protection against surveillance. With privacy, your messages are not at the whim of nation states or private companies who want to see what you're sending to other users. Next slide, please. Okay, so very interesting is recent partnerships that we have forged at NIM. The first one is Aztec, an OP rollup, as well as Lithium, which is a wallet that gives you access to Bitcoin level security. Now, both these projects are doing really interesting things, but without the privacy and the IP address obfuscation, as well as the geolocation obfuscation that the mixnet offers, they wouldn't be able to provide the sorts of privacy that we are allowing to take place today. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's look at a recap of what we've learned today. Then we touched on DeFi, we touched on messaging. That brings us to the end of this session. I hope you've all gained a lot from it and you found it useful. Over to you, Sudo.
Hello, welcome. Not welcome. Welcome for me and Clemens back to the call. It's really funny that even without speaking, I managed to mess up your presentation, Alexia. Sorry for jumping to the book. It was so well set up, and then I managed to ruin it. Hopefully you're not too
Sorry,
mad.
I tried to keep a clear narrative because I have a tendency to jump from one idea to the other, which is why I had 350 slides, hoping that it would bring clarity to the community.
All right. Well, excellent presentation. Hopefully the community enjoyed it as well. We do have quite a few questions, so maybe let's start with the Q&A. Clémence, want to take it away?
Sure. So, first question. Okay, you can go for it. I'm a bit lost right now.
Yes, Sudo's
All right. So the first question is I didn't fully understand the question, so maybe the four of us will be able to piece together what the asker was asking about. So if DeFi is not privacy, why are the ones in charge of our assets in DeFi unlike a centralized exchange?
Wait, what? Sorry, can you maybe read it slowly?
Sorry.
I understand the words. It's just like put together. I'm unable to make sense of it.
Okay, so if DeFi is not privacy, why are the ones in charge of our assets in DeFi unlike a centralized exchange? So probably not like a centralized exchange. If we don't know what this means, then I can just jump to the next one and maybe
yeah, maybe we'll get back to it later. Because,
Chigozie, if you want to rephrase that question, we'll come back to it. Okay, cool. So what do you say about this is from Bsist? What do you say about Web3 social networks? I guess in the context of privacy.
I mean, it's the same. Everything depends on how the architecture of that platform will be designed, and about like how data, personal information, metadata would potentially be leaked or personal information used. I know that the idea is to leverage a lot of the self-sovereign identity infrastructure for it, and making the user sovereign over his own data. But again, it really depends on at their core how these platforms are going to be designed, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I'd have to second that. It's all about owning your social graph, but the ownership only goes as far as how much privacy you have over that social graph, and if you don't, then you don't really own it.
Yes, that's a very good point. Clémence, next question.
So also from Chigozie, he's saying, my question is, can NIM privacy protocol be accessible in countries that the internet usage are well controlled and monitored by the government, i.e. some Gulf countries and North Korea? Or NIM is not layer 0, it's layer 3, right? Please explain more about this.
These are two questions in one, actually.
Yeah, it is actually a really good question. I mean, the mixnet has nothing to do with, like blockchains, and it's just like a technology that can potentially be leveraged anywhere. And we had a use case in which we translated an article for users in the Middle East that wanted to access Telegram through a tool that I've introduced that is NIM Connect. So basically rerouting Telegram traffic through our mixnet through the use of NIM Connect. I know that's a mouthful, but it's basically how it works. And we Sarinko and part of the team, and I think you, Sudo, too, were involved in coordinating with the team to make sure that we could post an article to teach people how to do that. So yes, definitely it can be done so.
Exactly. And now, as for, I think this is a separate question. It got like batched together in our list, but this is a good one. So, is NIM layer 0 or layer 3? What's the deal with that? I'm rephrasing the question, but I guess maybe we should explain.
Yeah, no, it's a good one because
layers versus yeah.
No, it's a good question. To me, it's clear, but I get why it wouldn't be to people. So basically, if we look at what's called the OSI model, which is the model that I introduced, we are at network level. This model looks at network infrastructure, so it has nothing to do with application level, which is like blockchains and basically when we refer ourselves as layer 0, we're talking about, in the blockchain realm or in the, application realm, we are the layer 0, because like we're, wait, let me draw it for you. It'll be easier. So there's layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, which is the model that I introduced. We are at layer 3 here in the, well, simplified OSI. But wait, does that make sense so far? Can you see layer 1, layer 2? And basically blockchains, it's hard to see. Blockchains are here. Yes.
Sorry, just one moment. Can you make Alexia full screen, Salazar, please? Just so the yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. So, oh geez, yeah. So, and this is the simplified OSI model with layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So we are at layer 3 networking, but blockchains, geez, this is hard, would be here, arguably, like at layer 5. And so because like whatever, like blockchain ecosystems will be here, we are the layer 0 of an infrastructure that's here, that's above this layer 5, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense and a really good way of explaining it. Yeah.
Sorry, my writing is
I
horrible.
think another way to think about it is as two different universes. The OSI model is looking at the internet infrastructure universe, and that's where we're a layer 3. But if you're looking at the blockchain universe, where L1s and L2s are sort of the trains and maybe the carriages and so on, yes, so the mixnet would be the rails which these trains are running on, and that's why we're a layer 0 in the blockchain universe rather than a layer 3 in the OSI universe.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Thanks, Ade.
Yeah.
It's a bit more complex than this. I mean, it's not as binary as I introduced it, but that's the main idea.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Want to take it, Clemens, or should I? Or not take it, ask it. All right.
No, take it, Clemens, take it.
So I think this one is from Raymond. In order to show the potential of NIM to protect our internet activity, we could address the controversial issues mentioned above, but what would be the easiest way to explain it to people who are not involved with this technology?
Well, I think that the easiest way to introduce NIM is just to, yeah, I mean, either use the mouthful. I mean, network level is important. I think that the key is like make people understand that we work at network level, which means that we're Web3 agnostic. We don't necessarily, we can potentially be integrated with anything that uses a network, and that's key. Is with the examples that we've introduced, whether it's whistleblowing platforms, microblogging, anything that sends data can use them basically. But it is a complex technology, so I understand that there's no straightforward, but it's just network level.
Ade, how would you answer that question?
Okay, I've got an interesting analogy. Series, Alien versus Predator. Nope. Okay, I guess I'm the biggest geek on here.
We lost you a little bit at the beginning there. So all we heard is Alien versus Predator. So you piqued my interest. Can you please repeat the first part?
Okay, so Alien versus Predator.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know how the aliens have this? Okay, is it the Predators? Yeah, it's the Predators who have this invisibility cloak. So the way I see it is the internet is the Predators without the invisibility cloak. You bring the mixnet in, and with the mixing, the relaying, and the encryption that goes on, your internet traffic now has this invisibility cloak and allows you to keep your privacy when you're using the World Wide Web.
Okay, so basically you're saying that you can become Predator if you use NIM.
Yeah.
Good analogy, again.
Exactly. I think that's all the questions that we had time for, folks. We're already at the end, and we still need to give you the next steps and the usual outro. So if you have any remaining questions, or maybe we didn't get to yours, then please make sure to bring them to one of our chats on Element or on Telegram or on Discord, and let's keep the conversation going. And also, of course, there are going to be some AMAs throughout the rest of Shipyard, so you can also just bring them there. Now, let's get to the outro. Can you please share my screen, Salazar? All right, so the secret phrase for today is layer 0, which is how you can unlock your POAP for this beautiful masterclass. I wanted to ask Alexia and Ade what this means, and maybe since we talked about layers already, you don't actually need to answer that. But why is it important in the context of your presentation?
This, for me, that's my answer. Ade, go ahead.
I lost you there, Pseudo, but I think you were asking what layer 0 means to us.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Maybe in the context of your talk, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So so as I alluded to earlier, layer 0 is the rails that allows applications to run on in a smooth private fashion. Yeah. So to me, layer 0 would be the rails, and an L1 would be the train with all its moving parts and the apps that actually allow you to interact with the Web3 ecosystem.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for that answer, and also huge thanks for the amazing presentation. And I would like to shout out a bit of behind the scenes info. Alexia jumped in really last second because our poor Max, who was supposed to give this presentation, is sick right now. So huge thanks for doing this on such short notice. And also we hope Max gets well soon. So moving on to how you claim your POAP. Make sure to go to the link that was shared in the chat, which is nintech.net/go/POAP, and enter the layer 0 with the same spelling that you see here on screen. But you only have 15 minutes for this because, as usual, we want to make sure that only people who attended this live with us get the POAP. Now, on to the next steps. Just a quick summary of these. Of course, as you know, this was the last masterclass, so the last sort of mandatory learning for level 1. So the next big challenge is going to be the exam. So good luck with that for everybody. It's going to take place on Saturday. Make sure to do the reading for it as usual. So with each masterclass, we also share a list of recommended and also mandatory readings. Mandatory meaning that it may pop up in the exam on Saturday. Subtitles, of course, will be coming soon. On the note of subtitles, we probably will re-record Claudia's lecture from this Tuesday about metadata, because there were quite a few cutouts. So we're going to be re-recording it so that people who want to learn the materials taught in Shipyard later on will have the complete playlist with all high quality stuff. But for now, we're just going to be making sure that most of the written material will be used from her presentation that we shared already on the Shipyard announcements channel on Discord and also everywhere else. So just read those and take some notes, and good luck. And of course, let's not forget that there's going to be a UPA fireside chat on Friday with myself, Jaya, and Huxian, and also Kenny Lee from Menta, and some other members of UPA. So I'm super stoked for that. Make sure to join us same time tomorrow. And basically that was my outro. Any closing thoughts, anyone?
Nice. Well, thanks for having us. It was a pleasure. Hope people could learn something from it. And thank you again, guys. It was great. Lots of fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Had a blast, and I hope everyone had as much fun as we did.
I hope so too. But I almost forgot one thing. After that fireside chat tomorrow, there's also going to be a workshop with Mikola, hopefully myself as well if I can make it, and Huxian with which I already mentioned about squads, forming squads, and also showing you a prototype of the first squad that already formed as a result of Shipyard. So if you're interested at all in forming a squad or maybe joining one, then make sure to join that one as well. It's going to be at 5 p.m. In a Jitsi call, so the link to that will be shared on our channels in time for you to join. All right. Have a lovely day, everyone, and catch you on the channels. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.